Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Blue Tinted Glasses. Today, myself and Manny are joined by, I think this is for the fourth time on the channel, Rob Tanner. I think we had him on during the summer transfer window and then after deadline day, and then when Cooper was sacked, and now again following relegation. Rob, thanks for joining us, mate. It's I seem to only have you on after the bad things, to be honest.
Well, there's always seems to be something going on at Leicester to talk about, doesn't there? There's always some sort of moments in a season that you can dissect and discuss. So, yeah, let's crack on.
Manny, how are you today, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. There's, like Rob just said, there's always something with us, isn't there? There's always a summer with something going on, something to look forward to, something to do, lots of work to be done in the off season. So it's never boring with us, is it?
Even more so this year, it's going to be really busy.
Yeah. We just did a show last night, Rob, looking at some of the players that are either out of contract or going to be out of contract in a year's time, and it's there's quite a few of them. So the club, I think, have many tough decisions to make this summer. Let's get straight into it because I know there's a couple of niche things that we want to talk about, but I want to start, Rob, with Ruud van Nistelrooy. Leicester now have been relegated for nearly 2 weeks, and Ruud van Nistelrooy is still at the football club. I think a lot of fans, I mean, I certainly did, but think that, like Southampton, when the R was next to us on the table, we would pull the trigger. But I suppose that was in anticipation that there was maybe a release clause. But that doesn't appear to be the case, Rob.
No, and the longer it drags on as well, the more mysterious it gets. I mean, I know that PSR is an issue, and you will have seen yesterday the EFL made a statement about the changes to the wording of their regulations. And obviously that's with Leicester in mind. I mean, it's quite clear in there talking about how teams can be from the Premier League coming down to the Championships and still be tied to their regulations as well. So they're gearing up. They're putting their ducks in a line to probably hit Leicester with some sort of sanctions at the start of the season, business plan maybe, that which will force the club to sell players and adhere to a budget that would be set for them. But the Leicester don't seem to be getting their ducks in a line unless they're thinking of keeping Ruud into next season. That none of that is clear because there's no messaging at all from the football club, and even Ruud's in the dark. I mean, we've just had his press conference this morning. He's been asked again about it. He's growing a little bit frustrated about it. He says that he wants clarity. The 70 staff that work around the football down at Seagrave, they want some clarity as well because there's a lot to do about planning for next season. What players are going to come in and out, what sort of training, what sort of pre-season do they want? These are all decisions that are made by the manager. So you need clarity about who your manager is going to be. Because there's only one advantage from being relegated so early in a season is you've got a little bit of a head start on your would-be rivals next season. Some of those don't even know which division they're going to be in at the moment in the Championship. Playoffs coming up and things like that. So, yeah, it's an opportunity now to really sort of start laying the groundwork for the recovery and a possible push back. But the longer there's either two scenarios. They'll either sack him at the end of this season, which would make me wonder why they're waiting this long to do it, or they're going to stick with him because the other alternative that's been discussed is wait until the end of the accounting year, which is June 30th. And then you won't have two managers sacked and their backroom team sacked in the same PSR calendar. But why would you wait till then? I mean, you need to have all your planning done by then.
Just before I come to you, Manny, on that scenario, Rob, about sacking him after the accounting period, is there no way around that? Can you not put him on gardening leave like we've seen West Brom, like we've seen QPR do with Cifuentes and bring in a new manager in the meantime? Surely there's a way around it.
Yeah, you're paying two managers then at the same time. Yeah. So, you've got to be careful with it. It's not insignificant, but the most important thing, and there is a theory, a way of thinking down there at the moment that is whatever comes. Let's just accept it and get on with it. Let's have a fresh start. So if they're going to get points deductions, let's take it. I mean, there's another theory that, when you know that you're going to breach, just go for it. At least then you'll have a team, because if you just go for it, at least you'll have a team then that you think will be strong enough to cope with a points deduction and push forward. But Leicester have been caught halfway house since 2022 when they decided to put the brakes on all the recruitment under Brendan. And I mean, that's the thing. When people say Leicester cheated, they haven't, because as soon as they realised what was happening, because they were budgeting for 8th, they stopped. If they were going to cheat, they would have carried on spending. And there's a theory that they should have done.
Manny, as we were just saying, Ruud van Nistelrooy is still at the football club. Are you surprised? Because we saw many different journalists and media outlets actually after the relegation saying that the club will hold talks with Ruud the following week, and from Ruud's own mouth, he said that hasn't taken place.
Well, I think in an ideal world, the club might look to make a decision in that regard, but as Rob just said, it makes no sense to sack a manager now and then start paying somebody else to do the job. If you sack the manager now, you're still going to have to pay him off for those weeks and months. What do we really gain from having a new manager? There's always a danger as well. The manager actually gets 2 or 3 wins sometimes, and you're tempted to give him the job, like Solskjaer, for example. That can happen. Ruud himself had a few good results and got this job. So I think we need to take our time, and I think the big issue is, before we can move forward with the managerial side, the football side, is what is our financial position going to be moving forward? A manager will ask, well, what's my budget moving forward? And we probably can't answer that question right now. It depends on so many factors, not just what the rules will be when we go down, but also how many players can we move off our books? Will somebody come in for Bilal, for example? Will somebody come in for Mads? At what level will they come in? What revenue will that bring in? What's our wage budget going forward? And any manager worth his salt will want to know details to these questions, and we just can't answer them right now.
Rob, if the Wolves game was an interview, was for the job beyond this season, he wouldn't be getting it. So I think a lot of fans' opinions at the moment is that there's just been nothing to suggest he deserves the job beyond this season.
And it would be very interesting if they lose at home to Southampton. This is a big game. I know both teams are relegated. Southampton are gearing up for their season as well next year. They've still got to get a manager in. They've still got to get a head of recruitment in. So they're in a similar sort of boat, although in a better financial position than Leicester. They don't have PSR hanging over them because they made a profit in their last annual accounts, which is very rare. But can you imagine if Leicester lost at home to Southampton on Saturday? Would a decision need to be made then? It's one of those. I mean, there's a lot to play for still for some of these players if they want to put themselves in a shop window to go elsewhere. Certainly to win the fans back. In terms of the Vardy farewell, they don't want to go out with a whimper and see the goats 13 years end like that. But for Ruud, it's hugely important, because if there is an upturn in a little bit of form, and he's going to have to go with youngsters now because he's got a load of injuries. If there is an upturn and there is a little bit of hope going into next season, that might secure him. But we really don't know. And it's only one person's decision. It's Kuntop's decision. We really don't know what he's thinking at the moment. And people I speak to down the club have no idea either.
Yeah, I mean, I saw your most recent article, which of course people can go and find on The Athletic. We'll put a link as well in the description of the video. But with regards to the Top and Rudkin situation, that's also quite highly spoken, massively spoken about at the moment. There's a feeling, I think, now that Rudkin won't be going anywhere, Rob, this summer, and he has been the target for many protests, rightly or wrongly. I think the problem as well, Rob, which you'll probably agree with, is that there's not really much transparency as to who is to blame, what his job actually entails, how much of it is his fault. Would you agree that you don't think he's going to go anywhere and that he will still be at the football club
I'm not hearing
next season?
Any indication that there will be a change in the senior management of the football club at this stage. At the article you're referring to, published yesterday, I raised the question there. There's 3 things really that need to be decided now. First of all, does he have the desire? Does he have the hunger to carry on? If he hasn't, then he's not doing the club the service he and his father had done for so many years. So that needs to be sorted. Is he up for this? Because this is going to be a tough ride now to get Leicester back and established in the Premier League. Second part is what does he do with that managerial structure at the club, because it clearly needs some sort of change, some sort of fresh blood in there, fresh eyes to oversee things. Does he make a change to Jon's role and have him as an advisor? Does he bring in another director of football? But they need some help, because with Richard's death and Susan Whelan's focus now solely on raising revenue of the football club, because that's the only way you're going to escape these PSR issues. You've got a two-man decision-making team, really, when you had 4 people involved. So there needs somebody else involved in there. That needs to be sorted. But ultimately, you need to decide the fate of your manager. Who's going to be the man in the technical area at the start of next season? That decision needs to be made. Well, it needed to be made weeks ago. Perhaps it has. Perhaps Top's decided to stick with him, but he's not telling Ruud that at the moment. From what Ruud's been saying to us in the press conferences, he's in the dark as much as us, and he's just focusing on these last few games. But I mean, we've even asked him today about questions about what needs to be done in the summer, because he says he knows what needs to be done. He wants to ensure that he's aligned with the club over that. Well, what needs to be done? But he can't say. You can't say because he might not be the man. So it's a very difficult situation at the moment. They could really do with some positive performances and some points on the pitch as well. That would raise the mood of some of the fans, because I went to Wolves. I travelled with some fans there and back, and trying to gauge the temperature of them and their viewpoints. And I think they were all unanimous in there's a lack of communication from the club, explaining what's gone wrong and what they're going to do to put it right. What's the plan going forward? But also they want some sort of change in the senior management of the club as well. What that might look like down the line. I mean, some more militant fans certainly want a change of ownership even. But some of the others don't think that is required. They just want Top to step up a little bit now. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions to be answered at the moment.
Go on, Manny. I know you had a few different things, that you want to either ask or talk about with regards to decision making and things like that.
Well, I think any football club, ultimately the decision comes from normally non-football people. So the Glazers are not football people. Todd Bowley's not a football person. The Fenway Sports Group originally aren't football people. But whether it's them or Man City or any club you look at, ultimately the person at the top has to decide the right person to make footballing decisions for them. So that top will no doubt have somebody delegate that responsibility. And they've always looked externally for managers who bring a structure with them. Certainly the best eras, Nigel Pearson, it wasn't just Nigel Pearson that came with him. There's a lot of backroom staff. There's a lot of key foundations, pillars put in by Nigel Pearson. Same with Brendan. He wanted to restructure the club in his own way, and that was one of the reasons, arguably, that he left too. I think Enzo was on those lines too. If you remember last summer, Enzo was hinting he himself wanted structural alignment, similar to what Ruud's been suggesting this summer. So, I don't have to put my best Columbo hat on to sort of figure out that there's something not quite right there, and certainly the results this season would indicate that. I think the issue that they're going to have is, do they recognise the kind of person that they need to bring that vision with them? They're always relying on the manager to bring those ideas with them. I think the club need to take that decision out of the manager's hands, because managers come and go, and then have that continuity that this is Leicester City, this is that keyword identity, this is our style of play, and there's a very good reason we have a specific style of play, and we're going to unite around that for an era, and we move forward along that lines, and then we find a manager who's suitable under those parameters. But you have to have that blueprint, that foundation in the first place. And I think externally is where they've always looked. So that's where they should look again. But I think rather than putting it all onus on the manager each time, they need to have somebody who's going to be here for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, ideally. And that idea, I think, is a modern thinking, younger focused, I would argue, European, for various reasons. But I was going to ask Rob, the question is, are they scouring around Europe? For example, Brighton found Fabian Herzler in Bundesliga B. Are they watching Portuguese football, Spanish football, German football, French football intimately to know that actually these are the most promising managers? Because it's not just about managers of the usual merry-go-round that we know in the UK. There is a wider world of football, and the Premier League is about the very best in class that you can find anywhere. And Brighton particularly do a great job of procuring talent from all over the world. Who's really doing that role for Leicester City?
Well, I'd like to think they are scouring Europe at the moment. I mean, what they do, they do use agents quite a bit. to bring in players and managers previously. So that was the blueprint before. I mean, that's how Brendan came in. That was facilitated for them. But they've got to be looking around now and thinking what is long term. But I think what the most important point you make there is about a strategy and an identity. You're right. Nigel brought an identity. Claudio sort of carried on with that identity, sort of acknowledged. I mean, which is the genius of the man. Acknowledged there wasn't too much broken there, and the players were familiar with this, and he was going to be the best way of getting the best out of them. And look at the success he had. And then after Claudio, it was back to shaky. So there was continuity in that, and then they changed philosophy. They went with Claude, but then they had Brendan in. It was similar in some ways, but built on that again. So there was a strategy and a philosophy. Since then, 5 managers in 3 years, there is no strategy. There doesn't seem to be a philosophy about how they want to play. And you're right about Enzo came in and he had a structure and he brought all his backroom team with him straight away from day one. When Ruud came in, he had nobody. It was just Ruud coming in, working with some of Steve Cooper's staff that had been recruited by the previous manager. I mean, how awkward must that have been at the time? And I'm not questioning their professionalism in any way, but, you know, they weren't Ruud's guys. They were loyal to Steve Cooper, and suddenly this guy's coming in and they're trying to do what he wants them to do. And that was never going to work long term. So that was a really strange thing about the Ruud van Nistelrooy appointment, the fact there was no backroom team to come in with at the time. So, but what they need to do now is settle that on some sort of strategy, whoever that's going to be as the manager. But you have that philosophy about getting back to finding young, up-and-coming talent that they can recruit for relatively cheap from Europe, as they've done so many times in the past with the Fofanas of this world and many, many others, and then develop them and then sell them on, a huge profit, but keep reinvesting in the same sort of philosophy, play a similar style of play. I mean, because when Ruud was talking about the 70 staff, that's including the academy. And how the first team want to play is really sort of influential on how the academy play as well, because they have to be connected. There has to be that pathway through. So when you get to that first team level, the only difference is the crowd. You know, the style of play and everything else, it's familiar to them. It's not such a huge shock to a young player. So this all needs to be sorted. That's what I say about so many decisions got to be made, and they've got to be made very, very quickly. And that's one of them. If you're going to stick with Ruud, if you decide to stick with Ruud, then you've got to have a structure around him that's going to benefit the club long term, and a philosophy that the club can adapt. And if Ruud doesn't turn out to be the right appointment, then you get somebody in that can adapt to that system.
We heard stories, Rob, earlier in the year, and I can't remember who it was and whether they're reputable or not, but there were stories that maybe either Rudkin wanted Cooper and then Top wanted Ruud, and maybe there wasn't an alignment between the two of them with the two appointments. I always find this very confusing when I read things online about the decisions that are made at the club. With regards to, I'm not talking about managers now, but players. How much of a say do the managers get? Is it like pretty much the final say, or how does that all work?
Well, just going back to the rumours about John and Top wanting different guys, they both wanted Potter in the summer after Enzo left. They were talking to lots of candidates around that time, and Cooper had his first meeting before Enzo had actually left because they knew it was coming. They knew he was going to go to Chelsea. But then Potter seemed reluctant again, and they were umming and ahhing. And then eventually, from what I understand, Top ran out of patience. Said, "Look, 3 weeks have gone since we lost Enzo. Now we need to crack on. We need to get planning for this season. We need to have a manager in place." Steve Cooper really impressed them with some of his presentations and the way he talked about what was required, what they did well last season, and what was required for this coming campaign. So they decided to go with Cooper. But then after 12 weeks, they realised it was the wrong appointment for them. Not saying Steve Cooper's a bad manager; it's just the wrong fit for them. And then you're finding Ruud van Nistelrooy is available, so there's no PSR issue in terms of paying compensation to buy him out of a contract somewhere else. And he's somebody that had impressed them previously as well. So as soon as Cooper was sacked, he was the first one that I was told that they would be looking at, they were considering, they were impressed with him, was the phrase I was given. So but there's no continuity in that thinking. In terms of the players, yes, the manager, as the final say, how recruitment is done at Leicester is the manager will identify what parts of the squad he wants to improve in that window, and he will give a list of positions to Martin Glover, head of recruitment, and the head of the recruitment team. Their job is then to come back with options for each position that they want to strengthen and certain traits, playing traits that these players will bring. And they put them into A, B, and C. And then they decide we'll go for A first. Then it's Jon Rudkin's job then to try and do the deals, to do the negotiating and make decisions on them in terms of like what the player is demanding, what the obviously agents are demanding as well. How much is that deal going to cost? But if they can't do A, they'll go B. If they can't do it B as well, they'll end up with C. But that's how it's always worked. So that's why you've had no continuity in terms of recruitment over the last 3 years. Because
so the profile of the
opinions.
player. So the profile of the player is basically down to the manager. Because the example I'll give you is, we went from signing Fatawu and Mavididi to Ayew and Bobby D. Cordova-Reid. I mean, there is a clear difference there.
Yes, absolutely. And that was because Cooper wanted the Premier League experience in his squad. He thought they didn't have enough experience in that squad. And Mavididi and Fatawu were playing in the Premier League for the first time. On Fatawu, he was a Martin Glover pick. He's one that he's gone to Enzo and said, look, this player is really impressive and we can get him for this price. We think it's a really good option. And I don't think Enzo knew too much about him, but he was convinced pretty quickly and they got him in and he did publicly pay tribute to Martin Glover for that deal. So, yeah, there is the manager that has the final say, but they can be swayed. They can be told. I mean, famously, it was N'Golo Kante. I mean,
Yes.
Ranieri hadn't heard of him. And then Steve Walsh kept walking down the corridors at Beaver Drive, whispering in his ear, N'Golo Kante. Eventually, they got him. And what a deal that turned out to be. So the managers can be swayed, but it's predominantly their final decision on who they bring in. And that's why there's been no continuity over the last 3 years. That's why you spend £80 million this summer on certain signings, and a new manager comes in, and only one of them is affecting the first team. That's Bilal El Khanous, because he doesn't fancy the others. This is why there's no joined up thinking around the football club at the moment.
Can I do, sorry, last thing as well, before I come to Manny on that, you mentioned Rudkin there, Rudkin's role in the recruitment. So is it fair to maybe point some of the blame of questionable negotiations in terms of fees paid, contracts given out? Is it fair to put that blame in Rudkin's direction?
Well, in terms of negotiating, yeah, and in terms of player sales as well, the valuation of those players. We've seen they've struggled really to get players off the books because a lot of the time Leicester's valuation of their players doesn't match those of the clubs that are trying to bring them in. So they step away, they walk away, and then they end up leaving on a free. I mean, he had 7 after the last relegation, just walk away for nothing. They haven't got that this time. There's only 3 that can go, so they've got to wheel and deal. So that is very much Jon Rudkin's department, yes. But like all things, recruitment's been a failure for the last few years. But it is a collective. It is a collective. It isn't down just to one individual at the football club. There has to be a structural change. It's not just about one individual being removed or not. It's fundamentally deeper than that. We see things in this world in binary form, don't we? We just see, everything's black and white. It's right or wrong. There are so many nuances to how a football club should run and the decision-making process at a football club. It's not just one autonomous person.
Manny, I know you feel quite strongly about the recruitment process and decision-making and things like that. Obviously, what do you make to what Rob's just said there?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then there's been a lot of issues with valuations of players. I think the whole concept of value is, again, it comes down to that football acumen, being able to judge what a player is worth on purchase, but also in the environment that you find yourself in today, what is he worth in exit? I've used Dennis Pratt as a key example that, we tried to shift him out the door a few years, but the valuation didn't meet ours and we ended up getting stuck with him. And he was another one of those that we didn't sell. Obviously, there's Soyuncu that we could have sold at peak value. We chose to keep for various reasons, that we gambled that we would make Champions League. But there is a plan that you have to stick to, and we deviated from it. And there comes a point where you have to cut your losses. You have to accept that I made a mistake in overpaying for a player, for example, and rather than have this player for another 4 or 5 years and have the next manager having a player that they don't ultimately want, it's an issue. And if you keep multiplying that by contract after contract, you end up with a mishmash of overpaid players who don't really fit any style because there's not been any coherence. And the second point is, is that the managerial issue is every manager has his own individual idea. And so if he's out the door in 18 months, which is probably what the average is roughly nowadays, the next manager comes in, but he's got players on 3 to 5 year deals that he's got to cope with, but he wants to bring in his own ideas. There's a continuation of mismatch, and the structural change that needs to be made is stop making that the managerial responsibility. Effectively, managers need to become coaches of the team that you provide for them. And then the key element becomes, as it always is, player trading. You know, are your purchases right? And are you able to sell them at the right point? Because player trading is how Brighton have created a surplus of £161 million, yet they've actually maintained a standard level of performance. Then they're able to go and actually get a better quality of kid down the line. So Carlos Baliba being the latest that they'll probably sell for 100 million down the line. So we have to start somewhere, which is bargain hunting. So we have to decide what style of play do we want, what is our structure in order to go about doing that, and then go back to what we did when we were at our best. Abdul Fattawi is still a bargain at 14 million, by the way. That's, you know, bargain hunting doesn't necessarily mean £2 or £3 million players, but every player has a specific price that the deal is worth and the deal is not worth. And I think that's the areas that the club definitely needs guidance and help with.
Yeah, Rob, the last kind of thing I wanted to talk to you about was the players. So 2 managers this season, and we appear to have had quite a few fallouts between manager and players. Let's start with Cooper, obviously, because I think there's a debate being had at the moment about player power and things like this, and how much the squad is to blame for this season's failures and things like that. So, you know, is it a fair assessment that the majority of the playing squad never got on board with Cooper from the start, or is that a bit too harsh?
No, I think a certain number, they were very much Enzo's players. They loved the style of football. They'd just had a great season in the Championship, winning the title. They wanted more of that. They wanted a continuation of that. They wanted to see if that would work in the Premier League under Enzo. But, you know, that's football, isn't it? Managers move on. He's moved on. The next guy coming in has a different idea. Not everything's structured for them like it was under Enzo. I mean, he was literally so much about the detail that, you know, everything was, they were told where to pass, and if that pass wasn't on, this is the second pass, and so they knew exactly how they wanted to play. It was all orchestrated from the touchline and on the training field. Cooper comes in and he has got a structure about playing out from the back as well, playing into midfield in very similar fashions with a box of 4 in midfield, big pitch, little pitch philosophy. But then he had an emphasis on individual responsibility in the final third, for players to do what they feel natural to do, you know, throwing off the shackles a little bit. Some of them, it feels like, were uncomfortable with that, and they preferred the more structured style. And it just didn't work. And obviously, that it was never a great look, that Copenhagen nightclub photo and video, and that. So that didn't help Cooper's cause whatsoever. I mean, yeah, he was sacked pretty much straight after that, but I don't know how much that had a bearing on it, but it certainly didn't paint the players in a great light. And then Ruud's come in and, you know, he's trying to instill he wants to bring in better standards, the players. I mean, you imagine the level he's played at, the level of professionalism, the detail that goes into making sure you're ready to perform on a match day. You know, Real Madrid and Man United, he wants that from some of these players. And, you know, hence the Harry Winks situation, where Harry was living in Nottingham. His wife's given birth. She wants to be close to her family around the London area. So she's moved back down there. He wants to be with her, you know, to help her with the baby, spend more time with the child. But Ruud believes that he should be staying at Seagrave Hotel when they've got an afternoon session followed by a morning session. So he's properly prepared, not travelling, you know, 100 mile. To training, he's ready and fresh to train again. So that's the issue there. How they move forward from that. I mean, if Ruud is going to be the manager next season, then you can't see much of a future for Harry Winks, and you can't be carrying a big earner like Harry Winks next season into the Championship and not playing him. And the same with Yannick Vestergaard. So there's going to be a lot of turnaround in the squad this season. Actually, there's going to be a lot of turnaround regardless of who the manager is. It's just who's going to come in and replace them is the big question, because that, as I said, the manager has a big say on that in Leicester.
Well, you mentioned Yannick there, and he has history, doesn't he, Rob? He has history of falling out with
managers either love him or hate him. I mean, Brendan brought him in and he thought he was going to be he was going to suit his style. Then he quickly decided that they'd made a mistake. But then I think Yannick can, obviously he's not playing. He can go off and do a few rogue things like do interviews in Denmark that haven't been approved by the club, and that certainly angered Brendan. And then he got cast aside. Then Enzo comes in, and suddenly he's integral to everything. And that changed, just pure luck in pre-season when Cody got an injury. And then Yannick came in to play that role and played it very well. Enzo loved it, and that's why he got his new contract, because Enzo wanted to reward him with a new contract and keep him and do that in the Premier League. Then Enzo leaves. Leicester got Yannick on another 3-year contract, and Steve Cooper comes in. He's thinking, I'm not sure about this fella. So it's all. That's what I mean about the muddled thinking. It's not just about the players you sign, but it's also about the contracts you hand out.
Manny, them two in particular. I know you're not a fan of either of them. It's going to be a problem next season, isn't it? Having them two around still, if we're not able to shift them away.
My overriding and specific worry with Vestergaard or Winks or I've mentioned Skip or Bobby Cordova-Reid or Ayew and these kind of players. Most of them are old, but Skip's one of the younger ones. But they all have similar characteristics that they're missing. They're missing speed. They're missing high technicality at high speed, because the Premier League is as fast as it's ever been, and you get caught out in this league. The Championship is completely different. We are the big fish against most teams. We are going to have the ball. Teams don't particularly want to press us, so they're happy to take a point, for example, at our place. In the Premier League, it's completely different. They're gunning for you, and you don't have that time that you have in the Championship. So I don't like the argument that he did well in the Championship, therefore he should be given a new contract for the Premier League. That comes back to football acumen. Someone should be brave enough to knock on Enzo's door and say, Enzo, I know you love this guy, and I know he did the passing and everything you wanted, but this is a different league. Can we find you a centre-back that has those passing attributes that you want, but is just fundamentally a younger, faster, again, bargain hunt, try and find a player with a high ceiling that we could move on. It's tough to move on with a 33-year-old that you give a 3-year contract to. What if it goes, also the contingency, if it doesn't go right? We already had a situation where we bought the guy, it didn't work out, and he sat on the bench for a year doing nothing. And it's happened again, and it's going to happen very possibly again next season. We did not learn from the error in the first place, because there was a fundamental misunderstanding of what the requirements were for every position, and that is speed, team. And if anybody watched the Inter game against Barcelona last night and saw Lamine Yamal, I mean, there's an example of what youth can do. I mean, our version is Abdul Fatawu. He's the guy that gets everybody jumping off their seat. And we have the capability of finding super young centre-backs. Once upon a time, it was Wesley Fofana. Electric players that we had have been turned around, and we've accumulated not just Vestergaard, but Cody, Wout Fass as well. None of these guys are athletic enough for the Premier League itself. And I just wonder, whatever manager, whatever we have, whatever backroom staff, they have to recognise that important fact.
And that has been recognised. I mean, Ruud has recognised there's been... I mean, he talks about lack of intensity. That isn't always mental. It isn't like people say the players are not trying. They're not fit enough sometimes. And they played a style of football in the Championship, which was possession-based. They didn't have to do a lot of the running. The opposition was doing a lot of the running. And then they come up into the Premier League and they're facing 60, 70% possession against them. And they've got to run. And some of them can't. And I think physicality has been a massive issue for Leicester this season.
You say it's been recognised. Go on, Manny.
Yeah.
Go on, Manny.
I was just going to say, it's tough to press for 90 minutes if you're 33. I'm a bit older than 33, and I can tell you, I can't press for 9 minutes, never mind 90. And the game just gets more and more, it gets faster every single season. It gets more athletic, even more structured, and you need those legs for 90. Especially now, it's not even 90 minutes anymore. It's more like 100 minutes these days. So, those legs will catch you up over time, particularly with the number of games that you're likely to play with multiple competitions. If you want to get somewhere as a European, which we were once, that's even more games. I think somebody understands that young is not just, everybody likes young players. There is a clear footballing reason and a monetary reason to focus on that specific area.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rob. You say it's been recognised. I think there's big concern at the moment with fans looking at Van Nistelrooy, because he seems to say some things in his press conferences and do something completely different on match day. And I'm referring to the fact that, for 10 days, all we got is about looking to the future, and we end up putting out a lone player. Some older players when you've got McAteer and Monga on the bench. He's just not filling us with confidence. It almost feels, Rob, like he doesn't really want the job next season. That's how it comes across to myself.
I think he does want it.
You do?
He does want
Okay.
it. Yes, I do. And I think he does, because if he walks away now, or he's removed, having lost 17 of the 19 games, that's terrible on his CV. It's really going to hinder. I mean, he was hot property, he was seen as, when Leicester got him, because there was quite a few clubs interested in him after that little interim spell at United and his one season at PSV. Would those clubs still be interested in him now? But if he goes into the Championship with them, rebuilds a team that he does it the way he wants to do, and it's a success, suddenly he's in the Enzo territory that Enzo was in last summer. So, I think he does want to do it. I think he has identified things that have gone wrong this season that he wants to rectify. I think physicality and energy in the team is one of them. But I can understand what you say about, leaving youngsters on the bench. You've got to be careful, though, with throwing in Jerry Momongas. Yeah. I mean, he's only 15, he's a schoolboy. There is, he is literally finishing school now. The physical demands on him, there's pressure on him as well. You've got to manage that as a welfare issue. I mean, he can't even change in the same changing room as the rest of the team for those welfare issues. So, got to be careful with.
Is that on game day as well? Is that on match day as well?
No, he can't change in this. He can't, because he's a schoolboy. He can't change in the same changing room as adults. So he has to have his own little area to change. So you got to. I mean, this is the other thing. So everybody's throw him in. He's only been able to until the April Easter holidays. He was in school most of the week. He could only train once or twice with the first team. I mean, that's not great preparation at this level for a match day, is it? To have a kid only be around you for one or two sessions before a game and then ask him to go in and perform. So you've got to be careful with them. Everybody wants to see the Jerry Mongers and the Evanses coming through. And I think they will in time. I mean, next season, there's going to be a big role for Ben Nelson. I don't know, Sammy Braybook looks like he's getting over his injury issues. He might have a chance in pre-season. Will Alves certainly will. Then you've got Hamza coming back from his loan. You'd have Hamza in the Championship, wouldn't you, in your midfield, because he brings a lot of energy and all action. So, and they're homegrown as well, so it means something to them as well. I think it does feel like it means more to them. And look at Kiernan last season; it certainly meant more to him last season playing for his hometown club. So these are the issues they've got. I think that you will see a younger, more energetic team next year.
Perfect. Well, thanks for your time as always, Rob. Just let people know, like you said, about the article that you released yesterday and where they can find that.
Yeah, I'm the Leicester correspondent for The Athletic for the last 6 years now. We do in-depth features on the app and on the website.
Perfect. Cheers, Manny. Thanks to you, mate. Thanks to you, Rob, as well. I'm sure we'll get you on, Rob, when we do hear news on the manager, because there'll be a lot to talk about then as well.
That'll be probably very soon.
Can we get Rob for one of these like 3-hour massive hardcore sessions and dissecting from head to toe?
I've done a few of those.
Yeah. I've seen them. No, Rob, you go on so many different channels, mate. And it is much appreciated by by all the Leicester fans.
The reason I do it is because obviously I talk to people down the training ground, I talk to people around the club, and fans just want some answers and they want some information. Like who does make those decisions on transfers and how does that work? And I mean, I have written articles on it, but not everybody has a subscription to The Athletic. So if I come on here and just try and answer some questions, sometimes I'll have to play devil's advocate a little bit. I can't be reactionary, but at least I can offer some insight.
Yeah, perfect. Well, as I said, thanks again, Rob. We'll see you very soon on the channel. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.